Hi, I'm Audree Grubesic, your host of Offsite Dirt. We are technology, we are events, we are all-encompassing of offsite construction, technology, anything within that space. And today we are talking Passive House, which is really exciting because not everybody understands what Passive House is. We've got two of the greatest experts with us today. The female rock star of Passive House, Katrin Klingenberg and Mark Wille. Welcome both of you, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
I love that you call her a rock star. I think that's great.
And I know that it's true.
Yes.
Katrin, give us a little bit of your background. What is Passive House and why you got involved in it?
Well, for one, I'm an architect, so that was my entry point. And as a young architect at the time, I've been in this for a very long time. I was wondering what I could do to make a difference and to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So with the climate summit that just ended and kind of climate on all of our minds, climate events, when I was starting out my career, I decided to quit my architecture job and to start my own company. And I came across Passive House. And Passive House was built as the energy standard that actually helped us to meet our carbon reductions that we had to meet globally. And that it really theoretically should be applied to each and every building on the planet if we wanted to achieve that goal. I'm like, hey, better start now. So that's when I flipped the switch and I started to work on nothing but passive houses. And then that led up to an organization that now sets the standards, that educates folks how to do it properly and how to transfer those standards to different climates, to different building typologies, off-site construction, all kinds of good stuff. So we really work with architects, builders, engineers all over across the spectrum. Yeah.
And Mark, how did you meet Katrin?
Well, it took a while to be able to meet her, but I heard about her because the passion and commitment that is who you are, right? It goes through circles, and you get people talking about it. Now, today you'll find her and her organization everywhere, and back then, not as abundant, but in the groups that I was meeting, everyone was talking about Phius. And so the opportunity to be able to meet, I'm trying to come up with the time.
That sounds terrible. That cannot have been that hard.
I know she was living in Champaign at the time, and I was working with the groups in Chicago, and you came. It was a board meeting of some sorts, and I think maybe there was 18 of us in the room, and there was a lot of buzz. And it went right into action mode, though. We were thrilled to meet, and many of the folks, of course, had met you before, but it went right into meeting. There was action items there. So, can't remember the place and time. You probably can, but I remember the energy to be able to get to that spot.
It's super awesome. And it's very exciting because, like what I was telling Katrin, is that I never even knew this existed until 3 years ago when I met Mark Wille. He was the one explaining it to me. He was the one signing me up for all these different types of newsletters and then all these different types of events that were going on. And I instantly found these, especially in Zoom in general, there would be 200 and 300 people on these calls. I mean, it's amazing the amount of community that's built around it. For you starting this and designing from there and educating people, has it just been a massive expansion, or how are you seeing things grow in the industry?
Well, over the last years, for sure. So last 3-4 years, we finally have seen the exponential uptake that we were kind of envisioning. But it took a lot of hard work to get there. So we started in 2003. That's when Phius was actually founded with individual single-family homes initially. And it took about 10 years until we finally had a certification program which helped promote it. Then we had a training program which helped train educated architects, builders, right? Then we added a builders program. And so every time we hit another kind of like roadblock, like, oh, now we have designers and they can't find the builders, we designed a new training program. And then we solved that problem, and now we're working on other training programs that will help to kind of alleviate the other pinch points. So all that together finally has taken off, and core of it was, of course, always a lot of advocacy work too. Talking to a lot of mayors, to policymakers, and finally they said like, hey, this is a really cool idea, and we're going to put some incentives in place. And that's happening around the country all over now.
Success.
And that kind of propels the exponential uptake.
So again, Mark, I'm just going to have you just give me a general understanding again, what is Passivhaus? What really, I mean, there's so much to it, but if you can just give me a general understanding, a little bit more clear understanding for people that may have not heard about it, right?
Yeah, I'm more nervous bringing it up sitting next to you, even though I've said it a million times. So Passivhaus is not necessarily referring to a house, right? So that happens in translations of words. And it's certainly not passive in terms of the action that the organization has. Mm-hmm. But Passivhaus together means any building. So it could be your church, it could be your school, it could be a high-rise, it could be a hospital. I've even seen it as a car dealership. Mm-hmm. Things you don't think about can become Passivhaus. So there's, the fun word is metrics. There's understanding that a building, regardless of it being a Passivhaus building, uses a certain amount of energy, right? It could just use what it wants, or you could decide how much it's using. So how much it's using is based on a whole bunch of scenarios of the wall, the roof, how many people are in it, how many bedrooms, how big it is, how small it is. So what are you doing to actually measure that and dial that together? Well, that takes a serious modeling, and it is executed really well, and it's either going to obtain the level or it won't obtain it. So the support system allows you to obtain it, and the materials and the know-how of the organization allows you to deliver it to the community.
How did you create this rating system?
Well, that's I started talking about the carbon reductions, right?
Yes.
The global reductions that we have to meet.
Yes.
The building stock is responsible for a lot of the carbon on the planet. So it's a pretty straightforward calculation. Like, we have to save X. The building sector is responsible for that much. So therefore, we have to reach roughly a reduction of like 90%. In terms of like loads in our buildings. And that's how we have configured those standards. And every building that comes through our certification program has to meet those targets. And that way we know. So essentially, like, we calculate a carbon emissions equivalent for each project.
Okay.
And
so does somebody come out and do like a calculation on the building to get that carbon footprint? Is that how you start, or how does it start?
It happens before the building gets built. So the design process is pretty intense for the person who leads the design.
Okay.
It's not difficult to do. You just have to know how to do it, right? Do the math, do the calculations, and put all the specifications in. And then we in the office, we just basically check the calculations, say like yay or nay, you're good to go, you hit our carbon targets, and then we're there. And it's really not difficult.
It's interesting because I was on a call and we were talking about, it was about Passivhaus, and they were doing a project that was in the UK, and we were talking about windows.
Oh.
Right? and how much light comes in and how they were measuring that. And that was just one piece of the puzzle, right? And I think that's what's so interesting about, Katrin, you've been around this is your world, but for like someone like me that is only new to construction for 7 years ago, I was like, oh, I didn't know that windows bring in this much heat into a house, right? Or I didn't know that there's a thermal break, or I didn't know that there's air between walls. Like, it is a very, I mean, it's funny because she's like, it's just so easy, right? It's just,
No.
but it's not. There's a lot of science behind this, right?
No, in my mind, I'm like going like, uh-oh, did it again. Like totally talking like tech talk and like, yeah, she knows all this stuff. It's obvious. Talking about metrics.
Nope.
So thank you for the reminder.
Yes, and,
like
and
breaking it
those
down
are the
to
things, yes.
initial principles and exactly. So Mark, like the principles for passive house building, like well-insulated envelope,
Yes.
airtight shell, very good windows, and not just like heat gain windows. You live in the south. You don't want to overheat your building, right?
Yeah.
You want the right window. A minimized mechanical system and a fresh air ventilation system that filters and recovers heat or cold air.
And I
in the
think that's
south.
super cool because I didn't even know that. I just thought like, you know, I'm a Chicago girl. We have an HVAC system that brings in heat. You know, you put the air conditioning on for cooling. I didn't know anything about, oh, you can actually take fresh air and bring it in.
Well, so these buildings are really awesome because you're able to calculate what's going on and you're able to adapt what will change because we might all of a sudden have 20 people come over. But the fact that first the building is airtight, now you are bringing in that fresh air all the time. Because why do we have buildings, right? Well, it's for people. We want them to enjoy them. The only way to enjoy them is to actually have a plan. Before we just built buildings. Now, when there's a plan, we can make sure that the people in the building are having a good experience. They're happy, they're healthy. I mean, us, right?
Yeah. So you go through this testing, you get certified, you go through this architectural design, you go through the checklist, and you build this project or you refine it. Do you have to constantly get like annual checkups? Does it change? Is there like things that you have to do to maintain it?
Well, the first part is that strategic planning that she's mentioning. So it's all modeled together. If something changes in the building, you would think that you would pass that on, right? And a building passes on to other people. When I would say in many cases when folks get into a passive house, they might not have experienced it before. So there's a lot of newness. One of the things they're experiencing first is that it's quiet and it's calm and it's comfortable.
Fresh air.
What's that?
The fresh air.
The fresh air. So today we all arrived at this destination, and when we come together as people, we're often coming off of a public transit and the hustle and bustle. Well, when you close the door to a passive house, you're now in the environment of one another, right?
I love that. That's so
And
cool.
when you
to
have
think
that, like, remember the time when you sat at the library as a kid and it was just that person reading you that story and you drawing that picture? Well, that's what it's like to live in a calm, comfortable building. And not
Healthy.
all libraries are.
And healthy.
And healthy.
So
Big time healthy. So if a change happens to that building, you'd want to call in someone to make sure that your building's still behaving that way. Because once you see what it's like, you don't want the alternative. Mm-hmm. Have you been in a building before where you couldn't sit in that chair because there was that draft on your shoulder? Or have you been in that basement of your uncle's that really had that kind of smell? You knew inherently when you walked in it wasn't right. Maybe you weren't able to say something, but you knew it wasn't right. So the fact that there's a process to get there and there's a community that can deliver that for others, whoa, amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to add to that too, because I think the beauty of, and here comes the word passive. It's not a very attractive word, right? But we're all very attached to it because it is essentially a very simple concept. So you were saying like, is this complicated? Doesn't somebody need to maintain that thing? No, really, like once the system's in place and as Mark says, nothing changes, it's essentially maintaining itself. It's super simple, and the best of all, like, and again back to the passive, is it is resilient. So it is not even dependent any longer on this now minimized mechanical system. If the power goes out, I have a passive house in Champaign-Urbana. I built the first one here in this country. And I've been in there like during like good Midwestern style blizzards, and the power goes out, and it's like -15 outside, but the sun is shining. So it's toasty in there while sitting around on a t-shirt, and no sweat, no problem whatsoever, right? So, and the same is true for hot climates. The temperatures don't rise like above like crazy temperatures, so that it becomes dangerous to be in the building. So that's the really cool part about this. It's absolutely resilient and keeps people safe as like the climate stuff keeps getting worse.
It's amazing that we can live in houses like that, or we can live in buildings like that, because I don't think I've ever experienced one. To be honest with you, I have never experienced one, but when you talk about that, it makes me want to.
You want one?
Yes.
I knew it.
Yes, I want one. And so when you were starting this and you were getting involved in it, was your project the very first reason why you started all of this? Is this kind of how the brainchild happened?
Yeah, it was the showcase. That's exactly right. I'm just like, I can talk all day long, like nobody's believing me if I don't build one, and people can actually walk into it and feel it and see how wonderful it is. And that's how it started. Like the city council came in and they checked it out and like, man, that's an amazing building. And then like they gave us a grant for the first affordable house. We actually started as a nonprofit housing development community. How's it go? Community housing development organization. And then we built a couple more, and then people heard about us like from around the country. That's actually how we started. And people said like, can you teach us how you did this? We're like, sure. So that's how actually the training program got off the ground. And then people wanted us to can the recipe, and that's how the standards came about. And then the rest is history.
That's amazing.
I like the part of Champaign, right? So here we're looking at, let's just call it the middle of the country. And we know from growing up around here, right, that you're going to have 95-degree summers, and you're going to have -10-degree winters, and this is going to change and adapt. And the fact that the house doesn't care, meaning more that the house is prepared for it, and that's the part that really touched me. When it's prepared, then we don't have to be prepared. We can live our lives. We can take care of what we want to take care of with one another. And it's understanding that aspect. And then all the work that went on to showcase that, whether it's in upstate New York or the heat of Arizona or British Columbia or New Zealand, all these places that you've had these projects, from a small scale home to all these things, it always applies. It's always for the betterment of people.
So being that you started this from where you started there to where you are today, and with all of your background, are you seeing more architects being involved in this area and more engineers? Are you seeing more people wanting to be in this practice?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really truly becoming mainstream, and that was our mission in 2009 when we officially kind of changed from the community housing development organization to standard setting organization and market transformation. And at that point, yeah, so a lot has happened. So it really, I'd say we're on our way to make that vision, mission happening and to be here. I had a really good point there, and it kind of escaped me, but I'll come back to it.
That's okay. So tell me about your name and why you guys are going under this whole new name and this whole new branding, and how did that all come about?
That's an excellent question. So we started out as Passivhaus, right? And actually Passivhaus, that is already quite old. It was actually invented in the 70s, and in Champaign-Urbana actually there are a couple of the original ones, and then it went away because like people decided energy efficiency is no longer that important. So when we first started, we started in single family homes, and I built my own home, and everybody said like, I could do this, like small home, anybody can do this, right? Well, turns out, like, because the system and the envelope, they go together in terms of design, the small building is actually easy. The small building is actually the hard one, because the surface to volume ratio influences how much insulation you need. So the more we were like working on it, the more architects got interested who were doing bigger buildings. And we learned very quickly, wow, a big multifamily project It's actually way easier to do because you need much less insulation. And the walls are much less like demanding. So at that point, the cost comes down. You have much less additional cost up front. And so more and more architects, like they perked up their ears, and engineers, and now we're certifying 250 unit buildings in New York City and high rises. And I mean, it's just like, it's, as Mark said earlier, it's really going into all different building typologies at this point, and it's, yeah.
I really hope that
So.
a lot of the people that I am engaged with in the volumetric or the modular world, you know, what we're seeing is we're seeing more modular factories coming, right? We're seeing more opportunities to build off-site so that we can help with sustainability, material waste, labor, all of those things. So I really hope that they start perking up their ears and start changing the way that we build boxes, because volumetric is just a way of construction. Passive house is a way of construction. So if we can blend both of those and know that we can have less material waste, we can actually have buildings that can breathe and live better, and we can actually do them in a factory setting, wow,
Yes.
that would be super powerful.
Yep, plenty of people working on that one, including Mark.
Well, she's got some secrets up her sleeve as well, which is great. And I shouldn't say secrets. That's not the right word. It's an open community. It's out there. And the application, again, when you talk about the house in Champaign and that adaptation to many different size structures, it is still the passive house principles apply to the building, whether it's 100 years old or whether it's going to be built on a site of land or in a factory. All those things apply. And so if you're looking at, from the offsite perspective, this project's going on, let's just say Kansas City. Great. So if it's in Kansas City, in that area, there's a window you need, and someone is actually going to calculate with the windows facing this direction, what kind of energy are we receiving from that wonderful source, the sun? And at the angle of the sun, we can enjoy that in the wintertime. And then in the summer, it's not going to be a problem of overheating the spaces. We've all been in certain, let's say, conventional code-built buildings where the client and their designer and architect wanted this wonderful glass, and it's a beautiful idea, and it's a beautiful concept, but it's not comfortable for the people. So that would be a really rough thing to be involved with after it's already done. But if you're planning that ahead of time and you're showing that it is comfortable in the lobby, in the back kitchen, in the upstairs unit, whew, right? That, I mean, when we're in the field of architecture and engineering and construction, we want to deliver the best thing we could deliver. So the best way to do that is to plan it with someone that can pull that together, and it's established. Sometimes people say, well, we need to figure this out and we need to figure this out. And oftentimes I nod along, and then when they come and say it for this category in the construction world, I said, nope, nothing to figure out. Passive house, it's the only way.
It's interesting, and I just want to talk about this topic really quick. We were talking about traditional construction and we were talking about building code, right? And so every municipality has a different way that you have to apply for their standard of building under the International Residential Code or the International Builder Code, and you have this standard. I'm guessing, and this is just a guess, you're probably way above that standard, right? As far as those types of building envelope and energy values and calculations. Is that a right assumption?
That is a very correct assumption. Now that could make you feel very scared and like, oh, this passive house thing is like a niche thing and it's out there, right? But it's actually not. So once you tap into all the opportunities of bringing the cost down, you can have this much higher quality building for pretty much almost the same cost. And we're all looking towards prefab right now to bring like this last little incremental bit down to like pretty much cost parity. And even without offsite construction right now, like multifamily projects, they are regularly coming in at like about 2% additional cost. That's not even contingency. So a lot of developers say like, no, absolutely, like we can't afford not to do it. So now add offsite construction to that, modular, panelized, what have you, right? It's a complete no-brainer. And especially also in the retrofit world. That's where this is going to make a big difference, because we have so many buildings that we need to bring up to speed. We're working with the Rocky Mountain Institute right now, with the Department of Energy, on industrialized retrofit projects. And we definitely need to get the industry to kick into gear. Otherwise, we can't do it, right? So we're all very, very hopeful that, yes, thanks to you, to your work, promoting modular offsite construction, industrialized prefabrication of panels, we need that to reach our climate goals.
And I love that you said, everybody's probably thinking in their mind, it's so expensive. Gosh, it's so expensive. How are we going to be able to do this? And you've just proved the point that it's minuscule.
Yes.
Well, and what is cost, right? In the traditional model of homes based on real estate and code, there's a minimum perspective, and there's a cost of a renovation, or there's a cost of a build. That's not a real cost. The cost is the project and the property and what it takes to operate it. And in almost all code projects that I've built and I'm responsible for in this world, I had no idea what the cost of operating was, because it wasn't mine anymore. The keys went to someone else. Mm-hmm. Their problem, their worries. In Passivhaus, you know the cost of ownership, not just the cost of purchase, the cost of ownership. That is magnificent, right? And someone says, well, you know, what they do, they have these thick walls. I say, well, you can have a thin wall and you could be uncomfortable and waste money on a mechanical system that's going to last 12 to 15 years and cost you unknown, or you have the trade-off and you put it into the envelope and now you're enjoying comfort with when the electric goes out. I mean, yipes.
Yeah.
I love it. I agree with you, and I love that you're making this example, because I think it's so important, especially in today's day and age, especially with what's happening with the universe and sickness and our health and people living longer. And so having a house or having a building that can grow and live with us is exceptional. So what's on the next docket for this next year for Phius? What's the most exciting thing that's going to be happening for you guys coming up?
So I just remembered that I didn't answer your earlier question, and it's relevant to
yes, please bring
to
it
this
up.
one. So the rebrand, right?
Yes.
Why did we decide to rebrand? We started out as the Passivhaus Institute US. Now we go by essentially the word, the name, no longer the acronym. And there's a reason behind it. It's not that we don't like Passivhaus anymore. This is like a building science principle. This is at the core of what we are and where we came from. But where we're going now, like the buildings are getting much bigger. A lot of people are still confused by the house term. Like they're like, can you not call it building? So what we're really trying to say with this is like, this is applicable to all buildings. We've come a long way. We have solved the cost barrier by cost optimizing the standards. We made the standard that was originally really invented in a mild, moderate, heating-dominated climate that had a lot of problems. We adapted that to all different climate zones, to all different building typologies. So it's really time to flip the switch. We want to be, as I always said, like before, like Phius, the name, like Prius in the car industry. We want to be for the building industry what the Prius was for the car industry. We want to revolutionize the building industry in the same way, and we can show that we can do it. And we have shown that we can do it. So now really the next year and the next decade is massive upscaling. Our last conference, the theme was emissions down, scaling up together. And we will continue to work on that. So really, we solved all the technical problems. We have no more technological hurdles. The next thing is political will. getting it out into the mainstream, getting everybody wanting this beautiful place to live, because it really is a big difference. So yes, we're up and running and set for the next decade to make a big difference.
That political will has been there. The director of DOE, right, has come to probably every event you've had and even spoken at. So that's an impact in our code to have there. And the 2 points that you guys crossed on before was when you mentioned offsite and you mentioned Passivhaus, they're parallel roads that intersect for the same reason. And the reason is quality, and the reason is durability, because we know what we can do. And we also know we need to always move fast. Workforce changes. And so the best thing is let's stop building buildings twice. No more renovation, no more rehab. You see buildings pop up all the time that essentially should have an X on them in 5 years. But they shouldn't. They don't need to go that way. So talk about cost. What's the cost of renovating a few years down the road? What's the cost of someone's health? Put a number on that. I bet you're wrong. I bet it's a lot more.
But the good thing is we don't even have to do it. So with the help of offsite construction, we can meet the bottom line, and then all the other stuff on top of it is gravy.
Gravy, yes.
So.
And you know a thing or two about panelized, don't you?
Oh yes, like our second and third project, we were experimenting with like some super insulated prefab panels. Yes.
There's so many exciting things, and I am so honored that you are here and we are having this discussion, and it makes me excited that we're expanding the discussion in this very important topic, and knowing that there are solutions. So thank you both for being here today.
Absolutely, thank you.
I'm Audree with OffsiteDirt.com. You have got the latest and greatest on what's happening in 2022 and 2023 and beyond. So be excited. We are. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.